To last month's meeting of August 2nd. Has everyone had a chance to review those? Any corrections or changes? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve the August 2nd meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Second it. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Aaron, could you get us started?
Yeah, so the first item on the agenda, we have the Mark O'Brien request. Could the applicant or anyone speaking on behalf please step forward and state your first and last name for the minutes?
Good morning, my name is Mark O'Brien, my wife Mary is here as well.
Could you please speak into the microphone?
Sure.
Yeah, I'll give a brief overview here, and then we'll pass it back to the board. So this request specifically is located off of DeVitt Avenue Northwest in Silver Creek Township. The property is 0.39 acres, zoned urban rural transition, and located on Lock Lake, which is classified as general development. Little background was this property consisted of 2 lots, which each had their own home. One of the 2 homes was removed, and the properties are now to be owned in common as one buildable property. In 1985, the board granted a variance to allow one of the homes an 18-foot by 26-foot garage and utility room onto the existing cabin, stating it could be no closer than 5 feet to the property line. In 1988, the board granted a 12-foot by 24-foot deck, onto the lake side of the cabin, which did not meet the side yard setback as well. 1998, the board granted a 14-foot by 18-foot garage addition, 5.8 feet from the side property line, and allowed a portion of the existing garage to be used as living space. So this specific request, we are looking at constructing a new single-family dwelling that would be 10 feet from the side property line, that would have a total of 15.2% building coverage and allow the septic absorption area 5 feet from the property line and 15 feet from the home. I do believe the applicant, they did submit some updated plans, so we did drop that building coverage down to just below 15%, but we're still at the 10 feet from the side property line. So a variance is still required because we're going to be 10 feet from the side property line where 15 feet is required. As far as the septic goes, the absorption area would be 5 feet from the property line, whereas 10 feet is required. And it would be 15 feet from the home, whereas 20 feet is required. The township, they did approve of the request as written. I did not see any other response from neighbors, so that will wrap up my overview.
Thank you, Aaron. Does the applicant have anything wish to add to that?
No, just the overall process and trying to fit a new foundation on this property is very tight, and did work with Aaron and Scott Deckard in the Minnesota Department of Health to go through the variances requested, and the Department of Health also approved the location of the septic from a neighbor's shallow well.
All right. If nothing else, what I'll do is I'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the public that has any questions or concerns? Seeing none, what we'll do is take the conversation up here to the board. And Dan, if you could get us started?
Yep. I guess one of my concerns was, and I guess it's been alleviated, Aaron, it says you've reduced your plan down to under 15% coverage.
Yes, sir.
Which would have been a real sticking point for myself. And then the other deal is, or questions, is with the shallow well, because I know out there in that area, it is lighter soils. So, you know, my concern would be is that there is enough distance
For that.
for that.
Yep, and that's where I've had Troy Kruk and Kyle Jenkins from the Minnesota Department of Health out to the site 3 times, working with me to figure out how far we could get away, given the narrow property. And it was their recommendation on this location and that distance from that shallow well to do that. I should also say that in that process, I did contact that neighbor. I offered to drill a shared well with them, which was not accepted. I also offered then to drill a new well at my expense for his property to alleviate this issue, which was rejected. And the Department of Health, Troy Kruk, also called that neighbor to confirm that he did not want to participate in either of those processes. Thus, then the Department of Health worked with me to get this setback to the 82 feet and approve that.
Okay. So, I mean, in those circumstances, there definitely is a practical difficulty here, a challenge to work around. My concern is still the 5 feet from the property line, but we've done 5 feet before. I mean, we haven't gone less, but we have done that. Do we have anything with the size of a house and the lot and with the septics, any type of a water drainage plan, you know, for water going to the lake, or how to mitigate some of that?
Well, I guess, could you clarify as far as drainage is concerned? I mean, I will have drain tile along the house and so on, just to make sure that the water is not in the basement. But as far as landscape design,
Yes.
okay, for landscape design, we're gonna be putting up some walls and per again direction from the planning department, I'm not supposed to disturb any soil closer to 37.5 feet, or about half the distance for the setback, and we've complied with that.
Okay.
Certainly from a builder's standpoint, they plan on, you know, putting the mats and the and so on down to make sure that we're not disturbing the soil and pushing anything during construction towards the lake.
Okay.
Does that answer your
Yep,
question?
that answers some of those questions, so,
Okay.
okay, I guess I'll
Okay.
pass on.
Thank you, Dan. Dan?
Yeah, you did your homework, it sounds like.
I had some help with the planning department. That was really appreciated.
That's good. Does that lot get wider as you go towards the lake?
Yes, sir. It goes from about 74 feet to 90 feet at the lake, 74 at Divot.
And you're 101 feet from the lake, is that,
No, 75 feet.
with
which
the
is-
septic, I'm sorry, I'm talking
Oh,
about.
yes, sir. That sounds right.
What is the standard, is that 75 also, or?
For Lock Lake, which is general development, and Scott could correct me, but I believe it's 50. So 75 feet's the building setback, the septic setback is 50. So there was no variance needed to the lake for the septic. The septic variance that our Board of Adjustment, or you guys are able to actually look at, is gonna be the side yard setback and the distance to the home. The portion of the shallow well has already been taken care of by the Department of Health and is not something that you guys would have to address necessarily.
I was just wondering if we pushed that septic towards the lake a little bit, if we could make it bigger to the house and to the neighboring lot. But I don't know if you guys already did that.
By pushing it forward, and if the topographical, you'll see that we tried to keep that from going down the hill and keep
Okay,
it
I didn't
at a
know
level
what
plane is what we tried to do.
That's one thing on here, the writing's very small. Even with my cheaters, I gotta get a magnifying glass. A little bit, but, okay, that was just a thought that we could get a little more room than 5 feet. I'd like to see 10, but,
By moving
we
it
have
that
done.
direction also, I have to stay 50 feet away from the other neighbor's deep well,
yep,
and moving it that direction probably won't help that,
okay. That was
because
just,
their well is out front.
I was concerned about the 15.2 and then that septic system, but you've taken care of the 15.2, so
Yes, sir.
I guess I'd like to see what the rest of the board has to say.
All right, thank you, Dan. Russ?
The water, you're gonna keep the water away from the septic tank, or try and,
Yeah,
Runoff?
the two tanks are towards Divot from the drain field. And from a landscaping standpoint, yes, we've got to keep the water away from the septic field as best we can as well. Yes, sir.
see, I don't have no, I'm fine with that. Yeah, I think my other stuff has been answered.
Okay.
Thank you, Russ. Yeah, I can see the hardship here with the neighboring well, and I think it's worth, oh, sorry, that's okay. Yeah, no problem.
Feel like I'm in church and that went off. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. And I commend you on your doing your work and working with the Department of Health, and actually, you know, trying to accommodate your neighbor on this whole thing. That really kind of eliminated a lot of concerns that I had, so I can go along with the variance request. So with that said, do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the request to construct a single-family dwelling, 10 feet from the side yard with a total not to exceed 15% building coverage, with the absorption area would be 5 feet from the property line and 15 feet from the home. With the building, with all conditions of the Minnesota Department of Health, a variance approval must be followed. The site plan as Exhibit A, building plans noted as Exhibit B, and the septic plan noted as Exhibit C.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second, any discussion?
I did have one more comment.
Sure.
What's the impervious on that? I forgot to.
The
22.8.
So we got a little bit, because I've seen there's some potential sidewalks and stuff maybe going in there, or maybe they're removed. But I was just curious.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't know what that would be there. That's a good question.
I just, why didn't I ask that? I had
didn't
it
see
written down here. I didn't see anything.
Aaron?
All right, so next item on the agenda, we have the Steinbrecher Company's request. Could the applicant step forward? And it does sound like their septic designer, contractor, is a little late. So I'm not sure if the applicant wanted to go now or if they could request to maybe be pushed to the end.
I'll leave that up to you.
I would love to request to be at the end.
Okay,
but
we'll do that.
Is that thank you.
All right.
All right, so the next item on the agenda, we have the Unfold Architecture, which is Michael Gray. Could the applicant or anyone speaking on behalf step forward, state your first and last name?
Good morning, I'm Michael Gray.
All right, I'll give a brief overview here. So what we're looking at is a request at 1386 Arnold Avenue Northwest in Chatham Township. The property is 0.48 acres, zoned urban rural transition and located on Buffalo Lake, which is classified as general development. The request, it will be to construct a home, approximately a footprint of 1,636 square feet with a 627 square foot garage. That would be 29.8 feet from the ordinary high water of the lake and 63 feet from the center line of the road. Variance is required to construct a new home and garage 29.8 feet from the ordinary high water of a general development lake because 75 feet is required. And also 63 feet from the center line of a local road because 65 feet is required. The township approves of the request as the water capacity will be the same or better. There was no written response from neighbors. And the main area in question related to this request, I guess I would say, is the channel area. So I'll just give a little brief overview on that. You can kind of see it in those photos. So it spurs off the main lake body. The applicant's surveyor first determined that based on the ordinary high water elevation, which is, what we use typically for setbacks, area calculations, etc., that the channel area was disconnected from the main body of the lake by an area of land, I guess you could consider it, that was above the ordinary high water line elevation. So the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources did have some concerns with the initial survey conducted, so they conducted a site inspection. And while the area above the ordinary high water line, based on another survey conducted, still showed the same data, but the DNR said that it was still hydraulically connected to the lake, so they wanted to see an associated ordinary high water line elevation, but they did say that, a variance could be applied for. So that will wrap up my overview.
Thank you, Aaron. Does the applicant have anything you wish to add to that?
Yeah, just briefly, I think I'll touch on a couple things. So the channel, as you can see, is on the northeast portion of the lot. And thanks, Aaron, if you can call attention to just where the 916 elevation crosses the channel. So, yeah, that's even better, thank you. we originally had this surveyed in the dead of winter. I think it was February, and the elevation of the channel was 2 feet higher than the elevation of the lake, and that picture showed the land between. And we were under the assumption that because of this disconnection via the ordinary high water line and visible land, that the channel was not considered a part of the body of water of Buffalo Lake. And that was actually confirmed by the planning department at the time, but we were all learning, obviously, this is a unique consideration. And so the DNR eventually wanted to be involved. So we've met on site with the DNR and with Aaron and the site property owners, and basically he deemed, well, we met in July, so it was a high water July, as you all know, and the water elevation was about 2 feet to 3 feet above the ordinary high water line. And the channel was connected hydraulically at that time, albeit it was very briefly connected, and you'd probably need a kayak and a chainsaw to get through it, but it was connected. So he determined at that point that it is part of the body of water of Buffalo Lake. So prior to that, we had been operating on a 15-foot setback from the channel, which would then require 0 variances. So had this confusion kind of carried out for a while, but had we not deemed that as part of the lake, we actually wouldn't be here in front of you today because we had a compliant design. But being that it is, we've now shifted our design a little bit to try to pull it away from that channel as much as possible. And, you know, we met with the township. They agreed it was a reasonable case. You can tell we pushed the garage slightly into the front yard setback because it's really a balance of, do we encroach on the street or do we encroach on the channel? And the street, actually, if you see on the survey, right here, the driveway is actually paved out into the township property because the road doesn't actually go all the way to their property line. So it's the front yard encroachment feels like a very reasonable thing to both us and the township because the township doesn't really even occupy that land for the northern parcel we're talking about. And then for the eastern setback from the ordinary high water line, we felt that this was, you know, the most reasonable case to push it as far to the west as we can. And it, you know, the point of a setback from the lake is 1, hydraulic, but 2, to preserve the views from the occupants using the body of water. And in this case, nobody's using this channel. It's a green marsh that's cut off nearly completely, depending on the time of the year. So it will not change the use case from those using the water. I can go into more detail. We've spent a lot of time on this, but I'll open it up to you for questions.
Okay. Thank you. What I'll do now is I'll open it up to the public. Should you have anyone in the public have any questions or concerns about this, step forward. I'm not seeing anybody, so what we'll do is take the conversation up here. Dan, if you could get us started.
Yeah, thank you. What's the current square footage of the existing property?
I don't have the exact square footage of the existing house on hand, but I do have, Aaron, if you want to pull up from that.
I've got some numbers right here from the
perfect.
survey.
Thank you.
You know, if you look at it, it looks like, you know, the building 1404, the porch 201. So that's pretty much what we're looking at, maybe right around 1,600 square foot for a footprint.
So the house ain't moving any closer to the channel? Staying
Well,
right-
the house itself will be, I think, 10 feet closer to the channel, but we're staying almost 90 feet away from the usable portion of Buffalo Lake. So that water setback, we're well within our means, but the channel portion, we are moving closer slightly.
Okay. Yeah, that was kind of what I was looking at from what I've seen on the pictures too, is I would kind of struggle with moving any closer than you are. Existing would be fine, and if you kept the garage in line with existing, I would be something I thought looked reasonable. I know there's a hardship there because of what you thought, but
Yeah, I mean, if we kept it, sorry to interrupt, if we
That's all
kept
right.
it as close or further from the channel, then we would be really encroaching on the front yard setback. So it's like I said before, it's kind of a balance of, you know, do we push it forward or do we push it towards the channel? And we plan to manage all on-site water with rain gardens and depressions. We're not manipulating the topography of the existing site. So any water that's caught on the building will be catched directed and put into infiltration basins that are natural, rain garden.
Very good. I'm not opposed to doing it, I just think it needs to be altered a little bit, in my opinion. But, I see the township didn't really care about the road, because they don't own it, just or maintenance it, it's not theirs. I think I read the right one here. And, I'm thinking push it towards the road, and you're 39.9 right now from the channel.
Correct.
See, we
At
make
the- at the
everybody stay
closest point.
60 feet, so I'm okay with staying where it's existing. But I'd like to see what the rest of the board has to say too, but I'm struggling with that portion.
I'm just gonna
I'd rather
point
see
one
move
thing
it.
out too
Huh?
quickly. So, a lot of times with the new home, there's a newly proposed septic. So this septic is existing right now, so that takes up that portion. And I was gonna point out, there is some floodplain out there currently. So they pretty much got the septic in the location that's gonna stay roughly out there. And the home was gonna meet all floodplain requirements. I just wanted to point out that may affect kind of the buildable area of the property, so.
Yeah, I mean, we can push and morph on this design as needed, but to an extent, I mean, the buildable area shown in that darker hatched area is nearly a third of the existing home. So we're non-conforming no matter what we do here.
Yeah,
And in order to hit a program of 3-bed, 2-bath, we're gonna need to be closer to the channel. And we deem 3-bed, 2-bath and a 2-car garage as a very reasonable case in this situation. I mean, the neighboring homes are at the same scale, if not much larger, on this portion of the lake.
being you're rebuilding it though, you could shift that thing and have the garage attached to the house and turn it at an angle in there to get much further away, but I'm saying as long as you stay at the current footprint, no closer, because it's very close to the channel if it's considered part of the lake. So that was my concerns. But I'd like to see what the rest of the board has to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Russ?
That, excuse me, that road that's up in front of your lot, can that be extended later on down in the future?
It could. They would have to pave up to the point where our driveway hits, but they did meet with the township and they were completely comfortable with the situation and how it's currently paved. The current pavement is all the way out into that township zone, so it would either mean we have to repave it, or the township would need to come and pave up to the property, either or.
But they don't see that here in the near future that they're,
No.
okay. And you're gonna put water gardens in, or rain gardens in to
Correct.
convert the water and that?
Yeah.
And it's pretty much the same footprint that you had before?
It is, but it's grown by one bedroom, so it is larger, but it's a reasonable case in our consideration for the current occupants are using it as a cabin, but they want to retire and live here full time. And in order to do that, they want to have enough bedrooms to support their family and have visitors, and that's the reason for the 3-bed, 2-bath.
Okay, then the canal, the high points of that canal are spring, and then it
Yeah.
recedes?
Yes.
Okay,
But he pulled up some of the photography of the existing canal, and it is connected at certain times of the year, but it is nearly impossible to navigate it, and it's completely covered in algae for 98% of it. It's only at the point where it touches the lake briefly that it's moving in and out. And over the years, it's closed quite a bit. And we did talk to the DNR on site about this and asked if it could ever be permitted to be redredged, and he said it would not likely happen. He said 99% chance it would not happen again because they no longer allow inland harbors off of water bodies. It's not part of their practice anymore. This was originally dredged in the 60s.
I guess listen to the rest of the board if they have some questions.
Thank you, Russ. Dan?
I guess some of my concerns are on, the increase distance to the channel. I can imagine the channel was either in the 60s was dredged out and brought in so that, either the people could access the lake, but right now, as we put houses closer to it than allowed per se, the pollutants go in there, the runoffs go into there, And then once or twice a year, like you've said, it does connect to the lake, and those pollutants and those things that we have deposited in there get deposited into the lake, you know, because it does run through. I don't think anybody can argue that in a heavy rain. You know, a 10-inch rain comes through, anything that's in that channel is going to get pushed into that lake. So if we, you know, continue to put houses closer and we don't respect what's back there. I mean, if this was a swamp out in a 40-acre field or something like that, yeah, then you're at your 15-foot. We're not connected to Buffalo Lake, and we're not dealing with some of those pollutants. It's gonna settle down, it's going to get eaten up by cattails, whatever. It's a different scenario. Here we have a body of water that can spill over into Buffalo Lake and flush pollutants into it that have been collected there from the houses and the buildings around it. 29 feet is close. I mean, what is our existing house at now?
I don't have that
You know-
exact
you
number,
know
but
that, Aaron?
it's
I'll try scaling it off quick.
I mean, I guess that's where some of my concerns are at. I mean, this pond is a filtration pond. It's a sediment pond for the properties around it. And if we continue to get closer to it and add more pollutants into it, when it does spill over, it's going to be impairing and into the lake.
I will say that almost all of the lots on this channel will be requiring a variance because there's just not enough depth on them. So they're all gonna be closer than that 75 feet. And currently, we don't have any water management on site other than, you know, downspouts directing water away from the home. But that's, part of this project is to completely encapsulate any water that lands on this house and carry it through directly down through infiltration rain gardens. And if it did not go through, I mean, the water management is going to be better, if not much better than what exists today, if we are able to move forward.
Okay.
The existing house and deck is between probably 35 and 40 feet. So like you said, it's maybe about 10 feet further. I can't speak as to why the DNR declared it hydraulically connected, whatever, that's up to them. I was out on site for the site inspection with him though. And he did, just to point out, he did say there's a very good chance that it wouldn't be redredged. They don't allow typically that stuff anymore. So he did say about 99.9%, but there's always that chance, but yeah.
Thank you, Dan. I have some of the similar concerns. However, I look at maybe a little bit differently in that it looks like you are putting a rain garden in, a way to restrict that flow. I am familiar with this property. I think it's the same one my uncle used to live in years ago. So,
Really?
yeah. And so I know about the flooding. It's not an issue. And since most of the time of the year, it sounds like it's either very little or it's closed, that channel.
Yeah.
Actually, that helps with, I think, some of the stormwater issue. Some of the phosphorus materials maybe have time to decompose, break down, and then you get those rains and then it flushes it into the lake. So I'm actually not worried about the channel too much as far as contaminating the lake, because it actually, I think, works in our advantage in this case here. So I really, I think if you can put in and design a rain garden for that channel area that can control that water, and I think I'd be fine with the variance request on that, so.
If you look along the back side of the garage, we have a rain garden running between the home and the channel, essentially.
Do you have that spec'd out as far as what kind of volume, what kind of flow that would handle it all? That'd be.
Not yet. We aren't that far enough in design, but we'll.
Have you increased the roof surface on that house? Would you know what the roof surface is and which way that will be draining? Are you gonna be draining it into the rain garden, the roof?
Correct, yeah. All water will be directed into the rain garden.
Yeah. So overall, I think it's a big improvement as far as improving the water quality to the lake is from what I can see, so I'm fine with it. With that said, do we have a motion? Hear a motion?
Is there any way we can move back at all? I mean, can we get it can we come back to 35? Because then we're getting close to existing. What do we have to do?
We'd have to either encroach on the septic setback or the side yard setback or the front yard setback in order to do that with this current design. I mean, we've tried to centralize it essentially the best we can in order to, not encroach on the water bodies first. That's the highest priority, excuse me. And the second priority was then the street setback because it is really just occupied by their driveway right now. And then the third was the septic because that's an existing system and we don't want to disturb it. It's been inspected and approved, so.
I guess I would like to point out too quickly, since unfortunately one of our members was unable to make it today, so we are at kind of an even number. A split vote does not technically pass, so you would still need the majority, so one way or another, so just for the boards.
Could I see an overview picture of that? How close is the neighboring properties to that? So if you did go that way 5 feet and have a 10-foot setback on the side lot, where are we at here?
That would just give us, that, I mean, we could definitely do that.
Right now it's 15,
Yeah, it's the standard setback.
5 feet. Just an option, kinda.
Yeah, there's a long line of trees along that property line, so it's going to be screened one way or the other from that neighbor.
I thought from looking at it, you could turn it a little bit and make it a huge difference.
For sure, we could do that, but that would have made us up here for 3 variances then, if we would have hit the side yard setbacks, the front yard, and it's kind of
I guess the water is my main concern,
yeah, and that's why we want to manage it all on site, so we're not pushing anything towards the channel.
Or the neighbors.
So you're wanting to see a little bit more.
I'd like it to be a little closer to what is existing, but right now, with the argument of, I mean, I can see the challenge of fitting a house in here. Okay, so there is a challenge there. But if we can guarantee that we can manage all their water on site, because that's my concern, is that this channel is a filtration area. And when it does overflow, it's going to, you're sending impairment into Buffalo Lake. If we can keep all stormwaters and all rains, in rain gardens, with the stormwater management plan.
Would you want the rain garden to meet certain specs, a certain rainfall, certain volume? Would that help? Would we want that rain garden to handle a 1.5-inch rainfall?
Or a 2-inch rain.
2
These
inch,
days, it's a
whatever.
2-inch rain. It seems
that
like.
something that could
I
be
mean, That's
designed?
something that can be done.
Yeah, we can work with our civil engineer to develop that plan and run the calcs and have that as part of our application.
Because if I may, we are adding a big garage in there too now. And there
Yep.
was an existing house there already.
Right.
So it's
Yeah, we're going from a 1-car to a 2-car.
Yeah,
There's-
and an extra bedroom wide in the house, so it's getting
Yeah, and
considerably bigger than what's there. It could be lived in what's there is what I'm,
Well, it's not a full-time residence at the time because of that fact. It's 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garages.
yeah, and I don't have a problem, I just would like to see it maintain the current footprint as much as possible.
And we are coming from a 19% impervious to a 23%, so we are increasing our impervious. I mean, we are changing the lot. I mean, we're not meeting the same setback as the existing house. We're increasing our impervious coverage, so I mean, we're changing the lot there. And so unless we're going to do something to try to,
I do think with these rain gardens designed and stamped by a civil engineer, it's going to, even with the increased impervious, it's going to be an improvement to what is there today. Right now, water is being directed directly into the channel, and out of downspouts, and this should be a large improvement.
Sure. Yep. If I may, would this be something that he could put together kind of after hearing our concerns, and then there'd be a full board here and see, like, I wouldn't mind being, instead of 15 feet, 10 feet, and then push it toward the septic a little bit, just to get away from that water as much as possible. Maybe not downsize your house or anything, but turn it.
We can move it wherever you think is.
Meeting.
yeah.
I can't hear you in the mic.
I'm sorry. I'm suggesting that maybe he comes back with a revised showing the storm management so that we're sure that it works. And maybe 10 feet from the property line, if that's okay with you guys, and 15 to the septic to try to squeeze this thing away from the water as much as possible.
Or, excuse me, or are we, or would we be okay with, you know, we're meeting the septic setbacks, we're meeting the side yard setbacks, all we're here looking at is a variance for the water. But if we, you know, we're going approximately 10 feet closer, we're getting more, but if we maintain all rainwater on site, you know,
Showing how that,
and showing how that works. And, you know, it's gotta be approved to be able to handle a minimum of a 2-inch rain.
Okay.
And all water's gotta stay on site with rain gardens and that.
I guess that's
I
what we're
mean,
looking for, right?
That's what we're looking for, is to try to maintain that and keeping all water on site. And, you know, before any permitting, that's gotta be proven to the planning zoning that it can be done.
Would you like a motion on that?
Yeah.
To bring it back? Do you wanna make the motion?
Can I step in just really quick too? If you guys are making any sort of motion for a stormwater management plan, I would suggest that it is specific maybe to the amount of water that's, you know, to come down and stay on site, rather than saying specifically rain garden, because there could be better practices in the future. Maybe a rain garden doesn't work out well, right? We still want to, really the goal is to keep the water on site, right? If it's just rain garden, they're limited. If they ever wanted to change it to another very capable, similar practice, they'd have to come back to the board, so.
That makes sense. 2-inch rainfall?
Yeah.
What is it? I'll make a motion to put it off to the next meeting. Oh, darn. Continue it to the next meeting with the stormwater management to fulfill some of the concerns of the board.
Okay, I just want to confirm that we're not moving anything, it's just providing that additional stormwater
To
management.
show that you could maintain all water on, stormwater on site, don't run off into the lake.
So I have a motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
Second, any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion continued then, all right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
That's one already.
And I'm all set.
All right, the next item on the agenda, we have the Travis Tolet request. Could the applicant or anyone speaking on behalf please step forward and state your first and last name?
Hi, I'm Travis Tolet, and my wife couldn't be here. She's a nurse, and they're short staffed right now, and we have a 10-month-old, and that would make this meeting very entertaining if she was here. So,
All right, so this request specifically, we are looking at being located 13943 102nd Street Northwest in Southside Township. Property is approximately 0.33 acres, zoned urban rural transition, and located on Lake Augusta, which is classified as recreational development. In 1979, a variance was granted to allow a new home that was not to exceed at that time 820 square feet. At that time, they didn't want to see a basement. They would allow for a crawl space, and that the mountain sewer system was approved by the county sanitarian. So this specific request is to construct a 771 square foot addition to the existing home that is located within the shoreline building setback, 33 feet from the center line of a local road, and 3 feet from the septic absorption area. The request also is to construct a 512 square foot storage building that would be 58.3 feet from the ordinary high water line of the lake. A variance is required to construct the addition to the existing home because it is located within the 100-foot shoreline building setback. It is located within the 20-foot septic absorption area setback and located within the 65-foot setback from the center line of the road as traveled. The request, it's also, once again, for that 512 square foot storage building. That's proposed at 58.3 feet from the ordinary high water line of a recreational development lake, which does have that same 100-foot shoreline building setback. So the township, they did comment. They say they approve of the request as the requested distances are similar to other properties. They also noted the coverage was acceptable to their board. Assuming they're referring to lot coverage at that time. So a neighbor commented, they did say they were against the request because, in quotes, they thought the mound system is coming to the surface and lot coverage is too small. So, Wright County Environmental Health Officer, they did comment on it just based off the distance the addition would be to the actual absorption area. They thought that could potentially risk the system's viability, especially during the construction of, say, the addition. But that'll wrap up my overview.
Thank you, Aaron. Does the applicant have anything wish to add to that?
Yeah, so when we bought this place August 7th, so we proposed the application in before then, so we had the prior owners sign off on it. When we bought this place, our plan was, so my wife's a nurse and part of her job is a triage nurse and they're allowing her to work remotely. However, you need to come with certain HIPAA regulations, have some sort of privacy, not have anyone around, all that kind of stuff. So our plan was to hopefully build a shed off the property where half of it can be kind of cold storage and then half of it can be an office, home office for her, so she can work from home half the time instead of driving down to the cities. So that was the initial thing, and then we talked about this being a potential forever home because my wife is a fourth generation Norgren from the South Haven area, so it's been something we've talked about where we want to put our roots down for the rest of our life, and this house came up and it just kind of checked all the boxes that we had, and we're like, okay, well, if we can make this a forever home, that would be even better. And so when I was talking to Aaron, he said, okay, well, if you guys are planning an addition as well, we could just put both those under the same meeting so you don't have to go through the whole process over again. So that's the reason why we have both variances requested, so.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, what I'll do is open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the public that has any comments or concerns about the variance request? Seeing none, we'll take the conversation up here. And Russ?
I'm gonna have to have somebody else open this.
Okay. Dan?
I've got some challenges with this one. I guess I'm looking for some type of a hardship, a reason. I mean, this is, for me, it looks like a want. To a point, if you've just bought in the property and you're asking, put variances, in my mind, it doesn't check all the boxes. Because you're here and in my mind, you shouldn't be per se. The building out front is an awful large building to be putting at lakefront. I mean, that's a large shed going in front of the house. I don't know, I guess without a site inspection, if there's other properties down there that have that large of a shed sitting in front of the house, lakeside.
I mean, there's larger structures that are closer to the water, yes.
Yeah, but not storage buildings, basically. And to be putting the addition on, there's not a lot of room to add an addition with the absorption area there. I mean, there's just not a lot of room, and we're looking for variances. This one's got a lot of concerns for me.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Dan?
Likewise, I had very many concerns. Reading through the minutes of back when they approved with no foundation, just being crawl space and stuff, must be a lot of boggy soil in that area.
I would fairly assume so.
Yeah, I seen where there's concern, I read something about, so now you're putting an addition on there for moving around and stuff. I think it'll be a big drawback to you. And like Dan, the shed is just too big, in my opinion. You're 2 feet from the septic you're proposing?
3, I believe.
3? And then with that big of an addition, we have no way of saying how many bedrooms. Is that set up for enough, as many bedrooms as it could possibly be?
We could have possibly our assistant zoning administrator, Scott Deckert.
I seen him there, that's like.
On behalf of the
what's
septic.
name of that question? I mean, I know a mound system, you have to have it per bedroom, and now this is doubling the size of the house.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I don't recall how many bedrooms this is designed for. We can put a time dosing on the lift station so we can prevent excess flows from hydraulically overloading the septic. We do that frequently. Obviously, there'd be a limit to how many bedrooms you'd want to add on a static sized mound that you wouldn't be able to increase the size of. So we can do stuff like that. I don't recall if that would be necessary on this one. I was actually a little more concerned about how close it was to the mound. It is right up to the actual berm of the mound, the absorption area, because I think we have sandy soils out there. The absorption area is pretty narrow, and yet it was still about 3 feet from where I measured that absorption area to be. So we don't typically have structures right up next to the berm of a septic or a mound. So those are my concerns. So the hydraulic flow issue, maybe not as much of a concern. We can regulate that with the timer on the lift station. I was more concerned about the distance. So.
What would you be concerned, like you were saying your wife might have people there?
No,
That
no,
increase-
no.
so
So triage nurse is basically if you call into a clinic and have a question regarding your medical condition, then she would be the one that would be responding to you. With the HIPAA laws, you can't have any sort of openness or anyone within. So, for instance, if a person is in the house, she's not abiding by HIPAA violations, even if she's in a door and close the door. So she needs to be in an oriental, separate structure, and then that will comply with.
Okay, well, hearing his concerns, and I was concerned about being so close to, and as it's presented, I wouldn't be in favor of it.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Thank you. Russ?
So you figure the septic system by putting a timer, it should
Yep, yeah.
fit in that.
Yep. So, I mean, obviously I'm very new to this, so I'd like to learn, I've been learning a lot. But we obviously want to maintain the integrity of our lot too. I mean, it's our home, so we're not trying to come in here and tear it all up and build a whole new thing. We just want to potentially make it somewhere where we can raise our family for 50 years. And so that's the reason why we proposed the addition to make it a 2-bed, 2-bath right now, which is perfect for what we have right now. But if we want to raise future kids, that's the reason we're like, okay, we need another couple bedrooms. So that's why the proposed addition would make it a 4-bed. So that's the thing. But the biggest thing is we were just looking to get right away, like this year, hopefully, to get a shed so we can have an area for my wife to be able to work remotely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Russ. So a couple of my thoughts on this. I break it down into 2 parts. There's the shed part, there's the addition part.
Yep.
So make it simple. The shed part, it's encroaching the lake. I'm not for that. I just, it's too big. It's an expansion toward the lake. So with that said, I can't go along with the shed. However, with the addition, I could see an addition with some modifications. We are in a rural area. We are in an area where if the township is comfortable with its location next to the road, they maintain the roads, I'm comfortable with it. So that's their issues there. So as far as the addition located next to the mound system, I would like to see that addition modified to give a little bit more room. Whether you shift it a little bit. I feel that the addition will not impact the lake at all visually, and it's far enough where it looks like it's fairly flat. And so, there's plenty of distance between the lake and which that water could drain. We are doubling the roof surface, so I'm not sure if there's a way to route that water maybe in a ditch to slow it down. But I think what I'd like to see is if you were to pursue the addition is to come back with a revised design that moves it a little bit away, maybe shrink it and size it with a stormwater management plan. Now, with that said, that's just my opinion. I'm one of 4 here, and it's actually there's 5. So we're kind of at a crossroads here. So this is a new process. So just kind of, we have a couple things we could do. We could present a motion, and that motion could be whatever. It could have been what I just shared. It could be something else. You have the, or we can have you come back and with a new plan. And it sounds to me everyone does not want that shed. So if you wanted to come back and present a new plan that maybe addresses some of the concerns, and we're happy to answer a few of those concerns on the addition, we could consider that. Or you could withdraw. or the other option is you could wait till our other board members here and see if the vote would change at all. So I don't know if any of the members have anything they would want to comment on before he.
I just had one more comment now. Hearing you say that you're looking to put this addition on for 2 extra bedroom, that changes that septic system, I would think, too. So just for
Yep,
your information.
yep.
I'm sorry for, that's all I had to comment more.
So I've got a question for you. The proposed shed that you have, was it proposed to have, let's say heat in there? Was there,
So
I mean, what were you doing? Because the question that I have, and I'll just point out, by ordinance, so long as other applicable standards, setbacks, lot coverage, elevation are met, there's no water-oriented accessory structure. They could have up to 250 square feet for a water-oriented accessory structure. But water-oriented accessory structure allowances do not allow the structure or facility to be designed for human habitation, must not contain water supply or sewage treatment facilities. So if it's considered water-oriented accessory structure, permitted, let's say administratively through our office, there's no heating in that building, there's no plumbing in that building. So potentially, if it's considered a storage building that is reduced setback to the lake, at that point, that is going to require a variance, but there is potential then at that point, if the board was okay with it, they may allow, heating in there because it is a storage building, not a water-oriented accessory structure. So I'm curious on what your plan for that was.
Well, I think the one thing that we want to kind of maintain within this whole process is kind of not only the impervious coverage, but also the aesthetically look of the house. We don't want to put a small little shed right along that house, and we want to make sure that my wife has a place to work. So we don't want to just fill it and keep it under 15% with buildings that we don't need permits for. And it's like, okay, we want to make this house function for, well, obviously the shed for obviously my wife and working, but then obviously propose the addition as, could this be a 50-year house for us? So that's the thing, and we'd like it to be, but
So I guess my question though is, were you going to have any,
yeah, we would let.
any heating in
Yeah,
that building?
it would need to have, heating.
Because if they were having heating, our definition for water-oriented accessory structure, then we would not be able to permit it even at 250 square feet administratively. Because that would not meet that requirement.
Any further comments, any suggestions?
I think on the way this property lays out and knowing what he wants to do with it, I think they've got to go back and try and reevaluate, whether it's a 50-year house or if they're gonna just make it work for the next 15 years while they live. Listening to Aaron, that shed would probably have to go back in between the house and the road if it has to be separated, or turn that into a detached garage. House is gonna have to stay roughly the same size because of I'm not designing it, but I'm just saying, looking at the property and what we're looking at for variances and where you're at, it probably would, it's up to him what he wants to do.
So would you like to, based on what you've kind of heard, where we're at, would you like some time to go back and redesign this? And you could ask Aaron for some questions as well if you're not quite sure.
Yeah, I think obviously I don't want to close it and be done with it. We want to make this our forever home, so we're willing to
So-
go through whatever it needs to
Okay.
be to make it. I guess the questions being is, as far as the shed, and obviously need part of it to being finished and heated, what are we looking at as far as what do we need to do? Where do we need to do it? How do we need to do it?
We don't want to get involved with designing it, but what is clear from what's been said from the board is the location of the shed on the water side. So that'd be done. Now, I think it sounds like there's room to put that shed on the front there, and it sounded like the septic system was a concern. So I would keep that distance of that shed and what that would look like and the size. I haven't heard anything about the size from this board, so you have a little leeway there. But yeah, I think that's where I would go. Think about it, and if you want, what's the time limit on this? Do we still have?
Yeah, this was their first meeting.
So we have a certain period of time which we have to decide. And so if it goes beyond that, then you just have to sign a statement to extend it. So
Yep.
for sure, go ahead.
Yeah, December 3rd. That would be 120 days. So we still have a couple meetings. We've
Yeah.
got September 13th. I believe the next one is early October, maybe the 4th, and then November as well. So we're good on timelines.
Okay, so, you know, we can go with the next meeting or the meeting after, so, I guess,
So,
what would work for
I
you?
guess from the board standpoint, from behind the house, as far as a storage building, are we just limited to the 250 square feet or less, applying for that? Or what is the board's?
I can't speak as board, you have to present that, but myself, I would be willing to consider something a little bit larger, you know, so we're not limited to 250 feet. So that's kind of up to you, and what you want to be able to do is demonstrate that you can make these setbacks as best as possible, and make sure that the issues that you had heard about the septic field is addressed. That's probably the biggest concern, is that septic field. So,
So I think so from my standpoint, the question I have is, obviously the addition is not gonna be necessarily, if it's approved, we're looking within that 3-year period. The shed, we would like to get done as soon as possible, because that would alleviate my wife work schedule, driving and all that kind of stuff. So from a shed standpoint, like, I know obviously I just asked this question, but what would you, I mean, we could work with Aaron on it, but just kind of,
Closest to 100 feet as possible. Away.
but 100 feet is the house structure, I believe.
Yeah, the 100-foot setbacks right here. You can see on the
I think,
cursor.
I think we need to continue this, and he needs to work with Aaron. Aaron has got all the, you know, the criterias, whether the shed is heated, setbacks, you know, maybe he's got to redesign it, put the shed in back and change the design of the house. I think this is, I think there's a lot of work to be done on this before you get
Okay,
to where you want to be.
okay. And I'd like to table it, or,
we'll continue the item to the next meeting, and if you needed more time, then just check with Aaron. We
Okay.
can certainly extend it even further, so.
Okay.
Realizing this is a big change for you, and it might take some time, so. With that said, do I hear a motion to continue?
I'll make a motion to continue this until the September 13th meeting.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Good.
All right, next item on the agenda, we have the Matthew Blount request. Could the applicant step forward? Looks like you already have. Can you state your first and last name, please?
Morning, Matthew Blount.
All right, I'll give a brief overview here. So we are looking at some properties that are off of Brighton Avenue Southeast in Franklin Township. The two properties involved are PID 208-300-321-300, which is about 20.4 acres, including the river. And then PID 208-300-321-301, which is about 25 acres, also including the river. So both properties, they are zoned general agriculture and located along the North Fork of the Crow River, which is classified as a transition river. So in 2003, there was an entitlement division administratively approved. It did split the existing home on approximately 5 acres. In 2018, a variance was granted to expand that entitlement division to 25 acres. So from 5 to 25, you can see on the screen in the cursor, this was the one that went from 5 acres around the home site on this access strip, expanded to the 25 acres, leaving the remainder restricted, which is both on the north and south side of that access strip. This specific request, as you can see on the screen, it is to further expand that entitlement division. So PID 208-300-321-301 would now be 34.5 acres approximately, including the river, leaving the restricted parcel, which is 208-300-321-00, with about 10.9 acres, same thing, including the river. A variance is required to allow that expansion We've already gone through the board once. We're going through it again. Really, anytime you're over 10 acres, in this case, it was requiring the board, so that's why you're here once again. The township, they didn't have any issues with the request. They felt, in quotes, it makes good sense. And I didn't receive any written comments, I don't believe, from any neighbors on this one. Nope, did not. So that'll wrap up my overview. And I do have some information here if you guys want to request it. I've got some prime soils, floodplain, etc. So.
All right, thank you, Aaron. Does the applicant have anything you wish to add?
Not much. We just want to move the imaginary line and help protect that section out front of the house.
Okay, thank you. Nothing else? I'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the public that has any questions or a concern about this? All right, seeing none. I think, Dan?
Okay, thank you. So I guess I have really not a lot of concerns. I'm just wondering, does that alleviate that access strip? Does that incorporate it into that property then?
Yep,
So we won't have, so you'll have 300 feet then of,
correct. Or more,
Roadside.
yep.
I think that's, in my opinion, is a good idea. So that's about all I got to say on that.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Russ?
I understand what you're doing. I'm thinking I have no problem with that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Russ. And Dan?
I guess I've got some questions on PID number ending in 300. Is there a building entitlement on that, Aaron?
I believe the deed restriction from 03 left that one as a restricted parcel, and I believe that's what Mrs. Rose corroborated as well at the front counter, so.
Okay, so then my next question is in the land use plan, how is that?
I think that was still general agriculture, but it would be under my recommendation if anything were to be approved, right? It says approximately 10.9. I did talk to Mrs. Rose. That would be something that it should be above the river, essentially. The surveyor would want it to be 10 acres, 300 feet at least on the road and 300 feet along the shoreline. Resource land, so. That's
So-
what,
So that could technically be rezoned or not rezoned? Technically, no. Okay. I guess, is there any, then on the 301 property in the front that you're adding to it, that would all be included under one PID number?
correct.
The driveway would go away as an easement, and that would all be one property then? And the easement would no longer be an easement, it's just part
Yeah,
of the property?
Not necessarily an easement, but that access strip of about 33 to 66 feet that's in there, that would now be expanded to approximately 900 feet as one parcel. So it would be, I spoke with one of our other planners, and, after discussing with him, he thought the best way to do it and the cleanest way would likely be just a corrective deed restriction. So if approved, it would almost be like the initial division, instead of it was 5 acres and then expanded, it was just one 34, 35-ish acre division.
Okay.
So with the respectable road frontages that are shown here, so.
Okay. Yeah, with that being explained, then I'm okay.
Okey-doke. Yeah, I'm familiar with the area. I just live right across the river. So it's not going to change much, and I agree with the township in that it makes sense. So I have no issues with it. So with that said, do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to expand the existing entitlement of Division 208, 300, 321, 301 to 34.5 acres approximately, leaving a restricted parcel of PID number 208, 300, 321, 300 with 10.8 acres. Subject to survey with a deed restriction that would replace document number 035008. Site sketch noted Exhibit A.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
I know you mentioned 10.8. Just to be more clear, if anyone had any questions, approximately, I do have 10.9 on there. I get the intent, but for clarity purposes for the minutes, maybe you could correct that just to 10.9 approximately on that.
Okay,
Ending in
I said
321,
10.8,
300.
okay,
Yeah.
Eyesight, 10.9.
Sounds good.
Revised.
We're good.
All right, thank you. With no more discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
we gotta go back to number 2.
Oh, yeah,
We still got number 6 though.
we can go with number 2.
Oh, okay.
I think we'll go back to number 2 if they're,
Yeah, we could jump back to number 2 if that's what you'd like. That's fine. All right, so I guess back to the second item we had on the agenda. It's for the Steinbrecher companies. Could the applicant or anyone speaking on behalf please state your first and last name?
Amanda Fernelius.
Shane Steinbrecher, septic designer.
All right, let me just get all the way back on the PowerPoint quick. All right, so this request we have, it's located at 9169 Arnold Avenue Northwest in Silver Creek Township. The property we're looking at is approximately 0.31 acres, zoned urban rural transition, and located on Eagle Lake, which is classified as general development. 1987, the board did approve a 24-foot by 36-foot building to be no closer than 8 feet from the road easement, the back property line, or the side property line. So back at that time, once again, 1987, the applicant was aware that the sewer system needed to be repaired, which it later was at that time. So the existing septic, probably approaching about that 40-year mark. This specific request, as you will see on the screen now, it is to install a new septic system that would be 6 feet from the garage and 4 feet from the north property line. Variance is required to install a septic system 6 feet from the garage as 10 feet is required, and 4 feet from the north property line as 10 feet is also required. The township approves of the request as Arnold Avenue is not a township road according to them, and the township does not have a concern. As for the written responses, I did not receive any from neighbors. We did have a Wright County environmental health officer comment on this request in regard to the nearby shallow wells, which would typically have a 100-foot setback from the septic. So they said, in quote, FYI, to whom it may concern, I met on site with the designer from Steinbrecher's and the Minnesota Department of Health representative Keel to discuss this replacement septic. Their proposed system is acceptable as stated. With the tight fit, they need a couple variances as noted to make things fit. We also confirm there is greater than 10 feet of clay soil to determine the wells are not considered sensitive, and the drain field only needs to be greater than 50 feet from the 2 wells. So that will wrap up my overview. As far as we've got here, this is just a septic-related variance. There's nothing for a new structure per se.
thank you, Aaron. Does the applicant have anything else to add to that?
Sure. So, good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity. So basically what we have in front of us, existing structure, septic has failed over time, a lot of constraints. So we worked through it. We're doing a pre-treatment septic system, which treats the water before it goes into the ground. We have many of these in Wright County that we do. By doing this, it reduces the footprint, the square footage, plus allows us to go to 12-inch separation to redox. So in still doing that, we still have these constraints in front of us. The applicant is simply trying to use the structure as it is for a home in that. So no expansions, nothing there, just looking to resolve the wastewater issue.
Okay. All right, thank you. Nothing else? I'll open it up to the public. Does the public have any questions or concerns? Doesn't look like there is, so I'm gonna take it up here. And Russ, could you get us started?
That septic system that you talking about, is that kind of been around for quite a while?
Yeah, at Vantex, we have some of them back into the county from 95 and 96 is when they started. I put one in last week, right over on Highway 55. We average 3 to 5 a year about. We have close to 100 or 130 of them in the local area that we maintain and service.
And they seem to be, like you said, they're very efficient and
Yeah, what they basically do is they break the wastewater down inside of them, what a normal mound would do, and then all you're discharging into the soil is essentially clean water. It is not potable, but fecal coliform is less than 1,000, CBOD, TSS less than 30. So if you were to have 2 drain fields side by side, one that was taking normal wastewater and treated wastewater, they'll go 3 to 4 times as long.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Russ. Dan?
Yeah, looking at the constraints that we have on here with the street or road behind it, the garage, the wells, and what we're trying to do. And it's been stated that we're not adding onto the house, we're not adding any bedrooms onto the house. We just have to maintain our wastewater that we already have. I know that we have done this before, a little concerned with the 4 feet from the side property line, but that is enough to be able to get between you know, if you have to get between it with lawnmowers and that kind of stuff and stay off the property line. My one concern would be is, you know, being able to install it and not cross the property line. Is that something we can do, or we talk to the neighbor about?
Yep, we have good standing with the neighbor, but we believe all this work can be done on the property.
Okay, that's always one of my concerns is crossing property lines.
Absolutely,
And
right. Yeah, the neighbor has been very workable in this and through the process been keeping them up to speed on it.
because that's always my concern when we start getting so close like this.
Absolutely.
We don't want to make enemies, and you have to live next to each other, and I don't want to be the one up here creating the enemies. So I guess seeing the constraints and the difficulties that we're looking at here to be able to repair something that's failing, I see the need.
Thank you, Dan. Dan?
I don't want to repeat anything, so I'm just gonna go to, how often is that thing checked, like yearly, 2 years, 3 years?
Yep, so this has an operating permit with it yearly. So we'll go out once a year, we take a wastewater sample, must be turned into a state lab, and then those results are turned into Wright County each year. At that time, we're following the manufacturer's recommendations. So we'll be cleaning sheets, we'll be cleaning pumps, going through and replacing the UV bulb yearly on it, doing everything that's required, and as long as the water test is passed and there's nothing with there, there's no corrective action. Pumping of the system, because you're checking it yearly, is done when the sludge builds up to 20 to 25%, and we're checking that yearly as well.
What would happen, not that you would do that, but if somebody didn't pay you or something, how would that work? What would the county's recourse be on something like that?
Sure, I mean, good question. At the end of the day, what is your final authority? I mean, if I may speak personally, I'm sure if you turn it over to the Wright County Sheriff, he'd be like, you want me to do what? But at the end of the day, you know, there's a process that you guys can go through, right? They're in violation. They have an operating permit that she would sign off on and all of that stuff. Write letters enforcement. Obviously, we have systems like this. When they change hands, it gets to be a struggle. I will tell you that 90% of them get on board. But in 22 years of doing this, there's 1 or 2 hanging out there that haven't. Eventually, if it would start to surface, then you guys would take action like you would do for any normal system that's an imminent threat to public health.
At this point, it doesn't look like there's a lot of options anyways.
There's pretty much no options. I have to say, for designing and putting this up on what we've done in 22 years, this is a level 9. I mean, this has got a lot of constraints to it. I've been working on this almost a year to get this done, working with the Department of Health for the shallow wells. It has been an ongoing process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. And likewise, I think my thoughts have been shared. I have no issues with this request, so. With that said, do we hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to install a septic system 6 feet from the garage and 4 feet from the north property line with septic plans noted as Exhibit C.
I hear a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you for pushing it back. Apologize I wasn't here.
No problem.
Have a good day.
Good.
All right, last item on the agenda, we have the Janet Smith request. Could the applicant or anyone speaking on behalf please state your first and last name?
My name's Janet Smith.
I'm Carol Smith.
Okay, perfect. I'll give you a brief overview here. So this request is located at 10969 US Highway 12 Southwest in Victor Township. The reference property, it is zoned general agriculture, and it's consisting of about 78.5 acres. The adjacent property is under the same ownership as well. You can see them highlighted in blue. So there was a deed restriction in 2022 that split off 10 acres from parcels 219-000-061-200, which left the remainder of parcel 219-000-061-200, parcel ending in 161-400, parcel ending in 052200, and parcel ending in 061100, with a total of 6 residential building entitlements, 2 of which are being used by both of the homes referenced in this request. So the request before us, it does involve 2 homes that predate the zoning ordinance, which currently exist on the same parcel. The applicant seeks to split both homes off onto the same newly created parcel through an entitlement division. The Planning and Zoning Office is unable to approve of the request administratively because the interpretation of the zoning ordinance only allows for one home per parcel. The interpretation, it's based off the specific language that says, in quotes, if a landowner chooses to use an entitlement on an eligible lot of record or quarter section. So the zoning administrator notes that the language is singular in nature, meaning that two entitlements cannot be used on a single parcel. The zoning administrator also notes that section 155.048, the letter G, the number 1, the letter D, states that, in quotes, an eligible quarter section may be permitted, and I'll enunciate, one single-family dwelling on the parcel as a whole or one division. So therefore, only allowing one dwelling per parcel. The applicant is requesting an appeal of the zoning administrator's determination, which is based off of what I mentioned, section 155.048, the letter G, the number 4 of the Wright County Code of Ordinances, that if the homes are to be divided off from the existing parcel, each dwelling would need to be divided onto its own parcel as an entitlement division. So the township approves of the request because what they stated were two homes have existed on the same building site for over 70 years, and there's not a great solution to splitting the properties into two separate ones, as it's a shared driveway access and there's a garage for the two houses. A neighbor commented that they support and encourage the proposal. So from what I have, that's going to wrap up my overview, and I'll turn it back to the board.
Thank you, Aaron. Does the applicant have anything wish to add?
Yes, I do. As I said, my name's Janet Smith, and I'm here with my sister Carol and my brother Richard. We appreciate your time today to consider our appeal of the zoning administrator's determination concerning the two residents on one parcel. I want to start with a brief history of the farm. The agricultural property under consideration is across the street from where our grandfather grew up. And he was given this land by his father in 1911. The original house on the property was built at that same year. Our father and his three siblings were raised in that little house. In 1952, our grandfather built a new, larger home just to the east of the first home. He commenced renting the original house, often to school teachers or people a little down on their luck. My grandfather continued to farm the land until his death in 1965. Since that time, the land has been rented to other local farmers. Our grandmother lived on the property until the early 1970s when she moved to an apartment in Howard Lake. Our parents bought the farm after her death in 1979 and moved to the property upon their retirement in 2007. They continued to rent the original house, fulfilling a need in the community. Looking forward with this property, our goal is to pass the farmland to the next generation of Smith farmers. The property has had two residents for over 70 years, as was stated. Keeping the existing condition does not violate the Wright County land use plan, does not change the character of the area, nor does it pose any adverse environmental effects. Unfortunately, in this day and age, people who want farmland are not interested in houses, and people looking for homes do not want nor can afford farmland. The relationship of the two houses has always fostered and served the community. The residents work together to maintain the property and help each other out. In the past, and continuing on today, the relationship has typically been younger people in one house and an older generation occupying the other. With a growing senior population and homeownership challenges faced by younger generations, preserving this potential relationship is a benefit to the community. The zoning administrator cited Wright County Code of Ordinance Section 155.048 G1D, as Aaron mentioned, as a reason for the denial. We feel that subsection G2, titled Existing Residences, better applies to our condition and our goal to preserve the history of this homestead. Our proposed subdivision would meet the requirements of subsection G4 as required. Our concerns with making two separate parcels include the single access from Highway 12, in addition to a shared driveway and loss of garage for the original house. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Anything wish to add? No? I have to ask the question, but anyone in the public have any questions or concerns? If you can come up and state your name, please.
Good morning, Troy Lang. I'm Victor Township Supervisor. I'm just here on behalf of myself and the rest of the board in support of this. I mean, the property's been the same family for 70 years, and I really don't, we didn't see that they're making really any changes other than trying to separate it and make it more kind of permanent.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. Anybody else? Doesn't look like it. I'll take this conversation up to the board. And Dan?
Yeah. I think we have to look at this to what the applicant is asking for. Yes, it makes sense. I mean, I can understand what they're wanting to do, transitioning and that kind of stuff. But I guess the appeal here is what does our ordinance say? And I know I've been in Wright County my whole life. I know it's one house or one resident per 40. This was on a large piece of land, you know, looking at it, there's a lot of farms. My personal farm I grew up on is on 160 acres. It's configured very close to the same way. Mom and Dad's house on one side, Grandpa's house on the other side. Today, the younger generation lives in one house, the middle generation lives in the other house, but it's still on 160 acres. The building entitlements still go along. The way this is configured, it's a challenge because how do you split it down, you know, down a 40 line or anything like that, but beside that, we have to still look at our ordinance and maintain our ordinance. And our ordinance is one house per quarter section, or one house per 40. As far as the determination that was made by the county, I think it's correct, you know. If there's any other way to split it or do it to get so it's on each one, then we're at a different crossroads. But as far as what the determination was of what the ordinance is, I guess I have to uphold the ordinance, is the way I'm reading it.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Dan?
Well, this is new for me, so I'm gonna ask Dan a question. So you're saying that you think each should have a separate PID number?
Well, if they're splitting it, but in agricultural land, our ordinance is one building entitlement or one residence per 40. And if you split this and it all has just one PID number, you're not having one house per 40. And that's what our ordinance is stating. And you're in agricultural land. This hasn't been rezoned to, you know, S2 or ag res or anything like that. We are in ag, and there's a lot of farms that have this on it, but you know, you put the houses together. I mean, we just had one last month on planning and zoning where there was 2 houses on a property site, and it's not uncommon, but it's in ag land and it goes within 80. So you have 2 houses next to each other. You have 2 building entitlements on that 80. So it meets our ordinance. To split this off onto one number does not meet our ordinance.
So what's right here, that example, that could be done. They have building entitlements that they could divide it like that. And
Yeah, we're not saying that anything about this having to be the exact division line. We're just showing that there is an example that they have the correct number of entitlements, and it appears that they could still maintain about the same outside boundary as what they would like, but getting the homes each on their own parcel, which would align more with what the ordinance states about the one home on, you know, I guess each parcel. They would each take an entitlement through each their own division, and now they're, you know, separately saleable. I mean, they could still be owned by the same person, used very similar, but from an actual standpoint that we could administratively approve, this is an example.
and this, you're opposed to that example that he's showing now?
I guess there's some concerns. basically the garage that's the building in the south in the middle, would become on the single lot to the east, become part of that ownership. So the access to that would be on the driveway of the other lot. So, yeah, there can be an easement, but still, you talk about making enemies, like, if you're constantly in your neighbor's driveway to access your garage, it could be
You can
some
from that door to
hardship.
the other
of-
side real easy. I think
I'm sorry, what?
3 doors, okay.
Yeah, and there's a wall in the middle, so to access the west side of the garage, you'd have to go on that other driveway.
But
On
as
the
far
other-
as on a pole barn, you can switch the garage doors to the other side if that's all.
There's doors on each side. There's 6 doors, 6 stalls with a wall in the middle. So you
I
access.
see a problem though in the future if you don't get it solved now with something like this, selling it once it's out of family or whatever, be real. I think it's a good idea to do what they're suggesting right here, right? Divide it somehow, maybe different lines or something, but I think it should have 2 PIDs too, and that is a code, right? So I guess I kind of go with some kind of a division because you can run it the same way. It's just technically solved, so I guess that's my opinion, is I'd like to see it stay up to what's suggested and not vary it, keep it, divide the 2 properties, 2 PIDs, I'll just say that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Russ?
My concern is you start splitting properties like this, it's just gonna compound and like down by Oxeagle, the area I'm out of, these double building areas, they're trying to split, you build a house here, bring another one in, mom and dad, then later on, they wanna split off again, so. That's my concern. You open it up, you're gonna have problems. You're gonna have a lot of problems with one for 40 acres. So,
Thank you, Russ.
Mr. Chair? Yes. And, I mean, not to get lost in this, what the appeal is, we have to remember, is the appeal is for the determination of the administrator. I mean, we're kind of talking about how to do it and all that, but I mean, what we're here is for, did the administrator make the right determination as one house per quarter section? I mean, I just want to point that out, that's what,
Thank you.
what is in front of us.
That's
Thank you, Dan.
the way I understand. Yeah.
Well, just kind of just a reminder, that we write planning and zoning rules, and they don't always apply clearly or fairly, and so that's why this board's here. This is a very good example. We have some confusion on how the original ordinance is written, and it has to be defined. And so when it comes to our case, we look at it and we talk about it. And in this case, when I look at the intent of the original ordinance and why it's there and how it is to work, my opinion is that the verbiage in the ordinance and the intent of the ordinance, that the correct determination was made by the administrative official. So again, I'm looking at the original intent and the purpose of that rule and trying to come up with a decision. That's how I came up with it, is the verbiage is clear on one. It's a singular in motion, so. With that said, that's my opinion. If there's no further comments, I'll ask for a vote. Do I hear a motion?
Would that motion be a dismissal of the
It would be a denial
denial, I mean?
of the appeal. Can you give the correct?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Barry Reimerger, Wright County Planning and Zoning Administrator. Based on what I'm hearing from the board, the motion would be to uphold the administrator's determination.
Okay,
That's what the
that's
motion
the
would be.
verbiage. Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion to uphold the administrative determination on this property.
All right, do we have a second?
second.
Second, any discussion? Nothing to add, okay. With all that said, all in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, motion carries. So, thank you for your time.
Can I ask a question?
The
Or
matter's
is
been
it-
closed, so.
Okay.
Any question you might want, maybe Aaron could help you with that.
Okay.
So, thank you for your
Thanks.
time. And do we hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
A second?
Second.
All right.
All right, for sure.
I don't think we have to vote on that, right? We don't, no, we just.
I figured I'd throw it in.